Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. In this video, we are looking at the Monday Night Football picks between the Raiders and the Chargers. This one should be a fun one. We have two high-powered offenses and two solid quarterbacks squaring off. So looking forward to breaking it down. Before we get into it, hope you guys had a good week. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It was not the best week on Sunday. Kind of struggled on DraftKings. Just missed out on hitting the cash games on the main slate, 137.7. So some big disappointments were DeAndre Swift just wasn't that involved early, and then they moved the ball, but they couldn't get it into the end zone. They got a bunch of turnovers inside the red zone of the Bears, and then we had Davante Adams was disappointing in the late game, and those were the two big killers. And then another one was kind of like not getting enough out of Calvin Ridley once again, so that's been disappointing. But Fanduel did cash on the main slate if you played that, so that was at least a nice little boost. But looking ahead at this showdown, hopefully we can get back on track here and crush it. Looking at just the snap counts for both teams here. Looking at the Raiders, a big piece of news is going to be Josh Jacobs, obviously. He's missed the last 2 weeks. If he's in, still a chance he gets limited a bit because, these a game time decision, so he's probably not 100%. But it's a good matchup because so far the Chargers have been giving up some big games on the ground to teams. So if Jacobs is in, could be worth the consideration because he's not going to be popular. People see that Q tag all week. If he's out, Payne Barber had a huge week. Maybe this is the week that you can go down to Kenyon Drake, who's now $1,400 cheaper. Last week, Barber was doing great in the second half, and they kind of just rode him late in that game and into overtime. He did play very well. He even got some receptions out there. Drake kind of struggled once again on the ground. He did some of his work in the receiving game, but only 3 of 6 targets. I would still probably in a showdown maybe take a shot on like Kenyon Drake, who can score from literally outside the red zone if he catches a nice pass. But it was still, and there was almost a 50-50 split, even though Barber was on the field the entire overtime and most of the fourth. In week 2, it was a big Kenyon Drake week, so we'll see what happens if Jacobs is out. Hopefully he just plays so we don't have to deal with it, because if he plays, I'm not looking at Barber. You could look to Drake if you wanted to, but I don't think I would. And then in terms of the wide receivers on the Chargers, it's basically a three wide receiver sets they like to run a lot of. Between you get Henry Ruggs out there, who's been playing well so far this season. You have Hunter Renfrow, the slot guy, and then you have Bryan Edwards, who is out there on the field, a big body who's been getting downfield and catching some nice deep passes from Derek Carr, so that's been nice to see. And then you occasionally get some Zay Jones action, who is only like $1,600, so it could be worth it as a punt option, but he's $1,800. It could be worth it as a punt, but I think you could look to Guyton on the other side. Speaking of Guyton, if you look at the Chargers snap counts at wide receiver, it is two-headed monster between Allen and Mike Williams. And then you got Guyton in there for over 50% of the snaps. He played 62% in week 3. So that's encouraging. He only had, I think, 1 catch last week, but he's still out there on the field a ton. Then you occasionally get some snaps for Palmer out there as well. So on a slate that you have a ton of studs to pay up for between Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, Mike Williams, Eckler, Waller, Allen. So many studs, not a ton in the value range. You're going to be basically kind of forced into jamming in Palmer or jamming in Guyton just so you can make the salaries work. So I don't mind looking to him at $400. And then the running back, it is basically Austin Eckler's out there on the field a ton. You'll get some Jackson and Roundtree to kind of spell him at times, but Eckler should see a lot of the passing down work and a good amount of carries for him as well. So going back to DraftKings here, if you look at the top end, you have Herbert is the most expensive guy. You actually have a nice kind of price gap between Keenan Allen and Mike Evans. I do like Evans more because he's been utilized a ton in the red zone, and it's kind of evident by his 4-to-1 touchdown ratio compared to Keenan Allen. But he's getting a ton of targets, 12, 10, 9. He's been super involved, not only just a downfield threat, but in terms of just getting intermediate routes. So he's super involved with Justin Herbert. I love getting to both of them. Keenan Allen is also right there in the mix. He continues to be a target monster. His is more, some of these can be more short routes, but he's also fine. Like 21 catches for Allen, 22 for Williams are basically equivalent. It's just that Williams might have a little bit more touchdown upside, but Allen is out there on the field just as much, if not more, than Mike Williams every week. Darren Waller might be a little bit tough to get to at this price tag. He's 92 in the flex. He's been solid, but he's not been as good as we thought after the first week against Baltimore. We had 19 targets. He still had 7 and 7 the next 2 weeks against Pittsburgh and Miami. But it's just kind of a price point where I might prefer to get to Allen, who's cheaper. I'd probably like to get to Eckler, Mike Williams, and it's going to be tough to get to all of those guys, considering I do want to get to both of the quarterback options. So for that reason, I think Waller might be the guy that I'm just not going to be that much into my forced into my lineups because it's kind of tough with the price. We'll have to wait and see on this running back situation. If Jacobs is in, he makes for a nice tournament option. Might be a little bit tough to get to in cash, just in case that they kind of give him just half the snaps. But if he gets 2 rushing touchdowns like he did week 1, it's basically fine. But I think Ruggs looks good if you're looking for a cheap, kind of a mid-range wide receiver. You don't have really anybody. You'll have the expensive guys on the Chargers with Allen and Williams, and you have the cheap guys with Palmer and Guyton. And then on the Raiders, you do have some value receivers with Henry Ruggs, who got the same amount of targets last week as the tight end Darren Waller, and gives you that big play upside. So I do like we're getting to Ruggs here at $6,400. Makes for a nice option with some big upside, especially considering that he's the only guy in the 6K range that I would look to play if Josh Jacobs is active. And then the value range here, you have Renfrow, who's basically a lock for 10 plus fantasy points every week. Just gets a good amount of targets. He's not utilized a lot in the red zone, but he did catch a nice touchdown and get his way into the end zone last week against Miami. But they use him a lot on third downs just to move the sticks. He's at a fine price tag, solid cash option. Maybe you can look to more upside plays like Edwards for tournaments, who might not have the same floor as Renfrow, but he does have a nice ceiling. And he has yet to catch a touchdown, but I think that's going to change just because as soon as they get into the red zone, they should be looking at a guy like Edwards, big body, that they can throw a fade to. Jared Cook is 44. He's not somebody that I'm too thrilled with. I'd probably like to get to Edwards instead, just because he's just not a big deep threat or anything like that. They have a lot of guys that they like to use in the red zone, so he's not going to be a big factor there. Between Allen, Williams, Eckler is just the 4th or 5th option at best. So I'm not that interested in Jared Cook tonight. I would probably like to get to Carlson instead. That kicker has been awesome for the Raiders. They do move the football, and they should move the football a lot again tonight. So super accurate kicker, yet to miss one. And they let him kick over 50-plus yarders. So that is great for fantasy. Get those 5 points for a 50-plus yard kick. So I like getting to Carlson at only, on a slate that you don't have a lot of value. I think the fact that he's cheaper than the Chargers kicker makes him look appealing. And the fact that he's sub 4K makes him look appealing as well. And then I'm not looking at either defense. I think this game is going to be high scoring. I like Guyton, $2,400. Only had 1 target last week. Did get a carry for the 2nd straight week. In terms of just being at this price tag, he's going to be interesting because you're going to need some cheap guys to plug in to jam in the studs. So I have interest in Guyton. I have interest in maybe a little bit in Zay Jones and a little bit in Josh Palmer, just because I need some value, and he's only $600. That can get me a handful of fantasy points. That would be nice. So that's basically it. You don't have a ton of options here, but you do have a lot at the top, so it's going to be interesting how you kind of mix and match and pick which studs you want to play. So looking at potential builds here, let's do one with Mike Williams at captain. Mike Williams, you probably want to pair him with Justin Herbert. We want to get to Derek Carr. You probably want to pair Derek Carr with somebody. You have some options down here, but I think if you want for a tournament upside, you can go Henry Ruggs, even a solid cash option, just with the fact that he's out there on the field and he's getting a good amount of targets. Hopefully, as the season progresses, he kind of fills that Nelson Aguilar role from last year. So you have 3,150 now. You can plug in Carlson, and you can plug in Guyton. And it's a 3-3 approach, which I think is fine because this game, I think it's going to be a close game. I think a 3-3 or 4-2 is probably what I want to end up with. I don't see myself doing a 5-1 onslaught stack tonight because I think both teams are going to be in the game. But something like this, you get Mike Williams, Herbert. You pair Herbert with 2 out of his top 3 wide receivers. And then you get to Carr, pair him with Ruggs, his big play wide receiver, and then you get a Carlson who can kick some field goals, and he's only $3,800. So that's one build. If you wanted to save some more money, instead of going Michael Williams at captain, you can probably go Keenan Allen and save, almost $2,000, more than $2,000. So plug in Keenan Allen. You can probably still want to get to both quarterbacks here. Yeah, 49.33. Let's see if you do plug in Carlson, who I probably think is going to be a staple just because he's at a good price tag, and I feel pretty solid that he has a floor of close to 10, if not more than 10 fantasy points. Now, if you do plug in Palmer here, we're left with 10.6, so we can plug in Mike Williams. This would be a 4-2 approach you could do. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Herbert, get to the value play in Palmer, and then you get Carr just as a quarterback with some high upside, and Carlson in there. If you wanted to go to Guyton instead, it leaves you with $8,600, so you would probably have to look to like Josh Jacobs here, and just kind of hope that he plays, and well, you'll know if he plays or not, but hope that he is healthy enough to get a good amount of work. If you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you can look to both kickers. I don't think that approach will be super popular, but if you do plug in both kickers here, you're left with $7,000. So if there is no Josh Jacobs, you go plug in Payne Barber, or you can plug in Henry Ruggs here. So that's two approaches. I think the first one looks a lot better. Looking at another one where we go with one of the quarterbacks like Captain Herbert, Derek Carr. Pair Carr with Ruggs. Get to Guyton. Get to Carlson. $9,800 left. You can get to Eckler. So you have Herbert, Guyton, Eckler from the Chargers offense. You get Carr, you get Carlson, and you get Ruggs on the other side. If you wanted to pair Herbert with the receiver, you can go with Keenan Allen. Now you have $1,000 left to work with. See if anybody $4,800. Nothing crazy there. So I think Eckler looks great as well if you wanted to play him over Keenan Allen. I think a lot of these guys on the Chargers look kind of similar. Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, just based on the price tag. One looks a little bit better than the other, but in terms of projection, I think they're all kind of similar. If you make a lot of teams, I think it makes sense to mix and match them. But that is kind of it, I think. Looking at just the core pieces for me, I think I probably like the way Michael Williams has been performing. I'll plug him in right now. I want to get to both quarterbacks. And then I think the kicker on the Raiders makes sense on this slate. Just looking for value, and he does give you, a high floor and a high ceiling as well, with the confidence that Gruden has with letting him kick long field goals. So that's about it for the DraftKings side. Let's jump over to FanDuel. All right, on FanDuel here, they actually have Derek Carr priced above Justin Herbert, which is something I probably wouldn't do, but he's only $500 separated. Between them, you might look to get to both of them, but once again, you only have 5 guys on FanDuel, or 5 positions to pick from, so I think you have a little bit more opportunity to plug in maybe some of these receivers and running backs. But I like Herbert at that price tag. I like Mike Williams, obviously. Scroll down, Keenan Allen is cheap at $12,500. Ruggs is $11,000, so he's a little bit expensive on FanDuel. I might look to get some of these other guys like Keenan Allen above him. Barber's $10,500. Hopefully Jacobs plays, so we don't have to deal with that. Carlson is $95,000, so he's a lot more expensive. Like on DraftKings, he's cheaper than Edwards. On FanDuel, Edwards is cheaper than him, so you might look to like Edwards instead. Drake, if there is no Jacobs, he looks like an excellent option at only $8,000. Guyton is $7,000. Cook is $7,500. Probably like Guyton just for the tournament upside. And then that's kind of it for the main guys. Like Palmer is there at $65,000, but I don't know if you want to play a guy like that on FanDuel. But let's see if we plug in Justin Herbert with Mike Williams. Derek Carr leaves you with $7,250. So you're already kind of looking for some value already by plugging in these 3. If you do plug in like Guyton, it leaves you with $75,000. So you would have to look to like Cook. So that's like a full-on onslaught stack. On FanDuel, you maybe look to Keenan Allen instead of Mike Williams, just based on the savings. You save $1,500. It'll allow you to pay up for at least a solid option in the mid-range. Like you could get to Edwards here, and then you can get to Guyton. So that would be something that you could do on FanDuel at least. If you don't want to get to both quarterbacks, you could take out Derek Carr and then look to get to like Eckler at this price tag, you'd be able to get to Mike Williams instead. And you have $1,000 left to work with. See if there's anybody you could upgrade from Edwards to Hunter Renfroe. $7,500. Maybe you can plug in Cook just for some more savings. So once again, on FanDuel, you're kind of getting to a lot more of these Chargers. If you wanted to, instead of Eckler, you could plug in Waller. And then $8,000, you have Drake there potentially. But that's going to be dependent on some Josh Jacobs news. And then about Jacobs, he's $12K. So he's kind of already a little bit expensive. But if you don't want to deal with a lot of these mid-range options here, I think you probably would like to get to both quarterbacks. Because I think both quarterbacks probably going to throw multiple touchdowns. And then maybe, unfortunately, won't be able to get to Waller. But if you're looking for tournament upside, you can plug in Ruggs here. But I'll go back to what I had originally with Keenan Allen, him. And then you have $8,500 left for Edwards. Then you can plug in Guyton here instead. So it's a little bit more tricky on FanDuel, but I think getting to these three is solid for at least any sort of 50-50 or cash game that you're looking at. For tournaments, you might look to get to just one quarterback and look to get to some of these other high upside plays. But for cash, at least I think you probably want to get to both quarterbacks just because both probably have like 20-point floors in this one. So that's about it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Best of luck tonight, and I'll see you all next time.